I'm David Liggett with the Data Center Hawk, and I am in Seattle with Tim Mirick.
Hey, I'm David Liggett with Data Center Hawk. Focused on cloud and colocation, data center industry trends, the dynamic market.
Tim is Senior Vice President of Leasing and Sales with Sabey Data Centers. Tim, thank you for letting us be here.
Yeah.
We're really excited to get to chat with you today. And let's just start off by talking about your experience in the data center industry, how you got into the space and how you ended up in the role that you're in today. And then talk about Sabey Data Centers and how the company has grown.
Sure. Well, so I guess I started at Sabey about 7 years ago.
Okay.
Which seems like a lifetime ago, but a lot's happened.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, I was about 25 years in the software platform business.
Okay.
Started out with a little company, Real Networks, streaming video and streaming audio company, right?
Okay.
Moved for about a decade. I was at Amazon.
Interesting.
Helping them start the third-party business. I was on the first team that was out recruiting apparel sellers and all that when we were just doing books and media.
I didn't know that, yeah.
And after that, I got in the payment industry for a while.
Okay.
And worked for American Express.
Okay.
When a friend of mine, a colleague that I worked with at Amazon, told me about this company in Seattle that I should come check out. They were doing some cool stuff. And I did, and I was absolutely fascinated by all the different things they were doing.
And had you ever thought about data centers, or had that ever really entered your mind?
No, not at all. I think, at Real Networks, we'd built probably one of the early, broadcasting centers for streaming media, right? So that's what we did. And it was just a room full of computers to me at that point.
Yeah.
In the basement of our building, honestly, right? Like all the things that we sell against, right? It was in the basement of our building right next to some train tracks.
Sure, and then talk about how Sabey Data Center started and how the company has grown to where it is today.
Sure. Well, Sabey's been around since the 70s. And the family is still, very involved. Private organization. Started out really in technical construction. And has, grown from there. We built... Dave Sabey and the organization built the first computer room that the organization built in 1978 for ADP, and did some other computer room projects for Boeing back in the 80s. And frankly, the data center side we got going, in the mid 90s. So we've been doing this, as long as anybody, if not longer.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, if I think about, we've known each other for a while, and if I think about how much Sabey has grown in the last, 4 to 5 years, not just in kind of markets that you've been in but with the product that is being delivered. It's really exceptional. One of the things that you all as a data center operator have the ability to do is obviously lease power to different types of industry verticals. And so I think that's, one of the things we talk about a lot is just the changes that different types of companies have experienced with their IT infrastructure over the last 5 or 10 years. You spoke about the healthcare industry, but how do you all approach different industry vertical types? Financial companies, healthcare companies, technology companies, in the way that they're approaching their infrastructure today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's frankly one, in a number of the organizations I've been in, we've sold a platform type product, right? Where ultimately at the end of the day, much of the product is the same regardless of vertical. And so there's definitely some nuances in how you want to approach it and the types of products that you need to have for those guys. But at the end of the day, right, what we're ultimately selling to them, what they're expecting from us every day, right, is security, power and mechanical systems that work all the time. And so we take a very personalized approach. I was thinking about that, and I've thought about this before, and I think about it in kind of almost like a micro segmentation method. And we're able to do it because you don't do thousands of deals in the data center industry every year, right? And so we can sit down, and at Sabey we really try to get to know, and when we're allowed the time, right, to work with the customer, which isn't every time, but we're allowed the time to work with them, really understand their issues, their concerns, and frankly the things that they're looking for the most, whether that's high compliance requirements, or anything else, right? And then really try to tailor the solution. So one of the advantages that we do have, frankly, as we look at deals, as a private company, we're not driven by any kind of exiting funds or quarterly reports or any of that, right? So it gives us the ability to look strategically at deals, frankly say yes to some deals, others might not. But just as importantly, frankly, say no. There's some deals out there that end up just being revenue grabs that aren't value add for us, frankly, and so it does give us the ability to say no. But it also gives us the ability to partner and really look at the long-term relationship. It's a core value that we have, and it's been something that we've done for years, and that's why we're so lucky to have customers like Providence Healthcare and others that have been with us for decades.
And it's one of the things that I think the data center operator community has done well over the last 5 years, is really listen to the individual company, to Tim's point, when they do have the time, and help really craft a custom solution that works, because every company is different. Every group has, I would say, different criteria that are influencing the decision and also the environment that they're in. One of the big changes we've seen in the industry, we've talked about this before, and it's being talked about at data center industry events really all across the U.S. and world, is the growth of the hyperscale market and how that's really impacted the space over the last several years. And what we've seen is data center operators really work to figure out how can we build a flexible, scalable product to meet their needs.
Right.
But there's also the enterprise user market that is, your typical Fortune 1000 companies that have, infrastructure requirements, redundancy needs. And so you're really working to build facilities and also deliver products that work for both groups. How do you do that, keeping both of their needs in mind, in the best way possible today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for sure. When I was thinking back, you think about 5 years as being a long time or 7 years being a long time in the industry. It wasn't really that long ago, but when I did start, we generally got 9 months, maybe even longer sometimes, to work with an organization and kind of tailor out the space.
Yeah.
And work through the planning, and you don't anymore really have that time frame, right?
Yeah.
In certain markets, Ashburn in particular, you're getting compressed down to 4 months from first meeting a customer to delivery.
Yeah.
And so it makes it that much harder. You do kind of have to go out over your skis a little bit, right, to deliver space that'll work. One thing that benefits us, I think from the beginning, we've always built modularly, and that's really helped us. We've tried to build a building that gives us great flexibility, to where you can, take in a 200 kilowatt user, right? Yes. And then on the other side of the building, deliver, 12 megawatts to a hyperscale provider. There's not much you can do if you've got, a big data hall and an enterprise customer comes. You just got to make some hard decisions about whether you want to give up that space or not. Yeah. But we've tried to build, buildings that give us that kind of flexibility. Even just recently, our core design for our building over in Quincy was about. It's 10.8 megawatts was the last building we were building over there. And we had somebody approach us. On one side of the building, we had filled that up, right? So we had 5.4 megawatts of enterprise business on one side of the building. These guys came to us and they had essentially double the requirement. But because of the way we built the building, we could support the air handlers and we could support the amount of electrical capacity and whatnot that they needed. And so we were able to do that and deliver that service to them.
Yeah, and I think that illustrates some of the flexibility I think the data center operators are showing the users today in the market. It also, I think, illustrates a point of kind of the reasonable capital deployment of the data center operator community. It's one thing that we get asked a lot about, which is just, hey, there's so much supply being delivered, and when we really, peel the layers back, it's not that there's a lot of supply being delivered, it's that I think data center operators are positioning themselves for growth moving forward, but they're doing it in a very, in our opinion, from a capital perspective, very wise way, to where they might buy the land, but they're waiting until it makes more sense to actually build a shell, or they deliver the shell and they actually will deliver the infrastructure when the demand comes along. One of the things that's been driving all that demand has been, as we mentioned, the hyperscale cloud service providers, and it's really the adoption of cloud services from a business perspective, from a consumer standpoint. As that has penetrated the market, it has grown the data center industry, over and over again over the last several years. And so it's created companies that some just go to cloud, some just do colocation, and some have a hybrid approach. How have you seen that impact just the overall industry, as a whole, and just that growth of cloud, and actually the cloud service providers leasing that back from the colocation providers? What's your take on that, and how you've seen that over the last several years?
Yeah, well, it's certainly driven a ton of demand, right, in certain markets in particular. The other interesting thing I think is we talk about cloud kind of generally, and certainly, the big three that are going out and placing their big, their bets and building out the public cloud are taking a lot of space for that. But we're also seeing those same organizations, right? They're also doing, streaming applications and gaming applications, and so they're taking down, 10 plus megawatts in different markets for all sorts of applications, right? The technology space for the successful organizations is just growing incredibly fast. And so in certain markets, it's forcing you to build ahead. You talked about, being smart about deploying your capital. I think by market it's different, right? I mean, by markets you have to take very calculated bets. In Ashburn, it's very different than Central Washington, as an example.
Yep.
If someone's coming to Central Washington and they're looking at that and that works for their deployment, maybe they're more TCO focused, right? Or they want renewable power or access to the hydropower that we have there. Maybe they'll be willing to take a little bit more time, right?
Yep.
Give you 6 to 8 months to actually build out the solution that fits their needs.
Yep.
Versus Ashburn, where you literally have to be sitting there with the space available, right? Or someone else will, frankly, right? So I think, and everybody, the answer on the other side of it, as far as how it's impacted, I mean, everybody's really, if they're not a pure, cloud play that's coming and taking, everyone else is looking at hybrid. I mean, that's a reality that I think every CFO is asking, folks when they're coming in and having a conversation about their infrastructure, how are you thinking about the cloud? Are we going to continue to pay for this on-premise data center you've got here, and how are you using colo? And I think those questions are really prevalent.
Yeah.
They're smart questions. And so it eventually gets back to us, right? They come and they want flexibility in their contracts and their ability to kind of work in and out. And so, it's forced companies like us, right, to address that and meet the needs of the customers. And frankly, I think we've done a really good job of it. But it's not, it's not easy because, you build out, a megawatt of capacity. And traditionally, you used to be able to, lease half of it to somebody for, 7 years, and you were set. And now you have to build in, a lot more expansion options and maybe retraction options and ROFRs and all of those things to meet the needs of the customers. But it's what's required because that IT environment for them is so dynamic.
Yeah, it's so dynamic and it's so important. And one of the areas that we've seen the growth most, you mentioned, is Ashburn. And the Northern Virginia data center market, those in the industry know it's the largest data center market in the world. But the growth there is dynamic and it continues to grow. You all have been in that market for a while now and have been successful, but have been changing as the market has changed to meet the needs. Talk about that and just that process. Being in that market and working to make sure you have something that's truly attractive to the different users that are out there.
Sure. I mean, we've actually had that property in Ashburn for a while. We ended up, we started building, I want to say like 3 years ago. We originally built, building C out there, and we came out with the same building that we had built in Quincy, and had tremendous success and filled up really quickly, and it worked great. And it just turned out to, honestly, the data halls, at least for the hyperscale applications, it's been great, for the enterprise applications, but the hyperscale was just too small.
Yeah.
And so we had to pivot and change, and so now we've built an Ashburn-sized building, and we got a 22.8 megawatt building coming.
Yeah.
But that was really important. It was a lesson that we needed to learn, and frankly, it kind of happened right in that inflection point where all of the bigger builds started happening.
Yep.
And so we were maybe just a little bit ahead of the curve by putting that building in. And it was, only 12 months later, really, we started on building B. And because that was the size kind of commitments we needed to make in order to address the requirements that were coming in the market.
If you go to Northern Virginia, I think one of the interesting things is the campus development that's taking place there, probably like no other market, but you're seeing that in other places, but certainly in the largest case in Northern Virginia. And it would be interesting to go back and look at the provider's original plans for those campuses, and see how the buildings have, hey, building 1 was scheduled to be this, and we built it. But building 2 is now scheduled to be double what building 1 was, just because of the large amount of demand that's there. It's a fascinating area to go and tour data centers. We're sitting in Seattle, and you all obviously know this market backwards and forwards. Tell us why users find the Seattle market attractive, whether from an enterprise or a larger scale provider or a hyperscale perspective. But what have you seen Seattle really do to attract data center users to this area?
Sure. Well, and I think like most urban areas, it's probably changed over time.
Yes.
I mean, we're lucky we've got a very diverse corporate group here in Seattle, right? Super strong in tech. I mean, that's what's obvious with Amazon and Microsoft, and F5 and the rest of those folks. But really strong on the healthcare side of things and biotech and that. And so Sabey, for a long time on this campus, have been very successful with the enterprise. Frankly, we take a lot of pride in working with Northwest companies. We started here in 1970. We've been here a long time. We got a relationship with a lot of different companies, and so that was always a keen focus. And then it's certainly changed over time. We're now, I think, what's most interesting, and as you see, more proximity-based applications, right? Applications that are benefiting, consumer experiences that benefit by having the gear closer to customers. We're seeing those companies come because we're really Thankfully, we've had this property a long time,
Yeah.
right? But we're only a few miles out of downtown, and we're one of the only real wholesale providers where you can put a megawatt worth of stuff close to the city,
Yeah.
reaching Seattle and the Bellevue environment. So you're seeing more of that. We've seen probably 3 or 4 deals like that
Interesting.
in the last year
Yeah.
or so, where they wanted to put down their applications close to the urban core, and you have great connectivity up to the Telco Hotel in town. And so it's changing all the time what the demand is.
Sure, and you also have a presence, outside of the city as well in Quincy and Wenatchee. Talk about those markets and what led you all to invest heavily there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of history there. We were, one of the first movers over in Quincy. I think we actually were looking at it before Microsoft even moved there. And I always love the story. I think they gave, at one point they told Microsoft, hey, you guys go locate your data center anywhere you want, anywhere in the world. Where's the best place? And that's where they, put their shovel in the ground, was over in Quincy. So we were the first colo provider over in that area. And when I started here, though, I have to tell you, I think all the business we were doing over Quincy was like regional disaster recovery. Regional disaster recovery, and then maybe there was a few people way out on the leading edge that were looking at TCO plays.
Okay.
Like BlackRock was one of our first customers over there.
Interesting.
And they were, very smart about how they were looking across the country. They understood what their latency requirements were. They were smarter about what the, kind of the infrastructure and whatever was there from a telecommunications perspective, and they were willing to kind of be a first mover in that area.
Yeah.
And they built there, and they've been there a long time. Now, certainly it's much more than a regional play, much more than a disaster recovery play. We see many of our customers have actually migrated from the west side of the mountains to the east side of the mountains, with their primary locations.
Yeah.
And it's got all of that kind of safety stuff. Right, the other side of the mountains, it's off this Cascadia subduction zone, which is a term near and dear to our hearts if you deal with the Cascade Mountains in any way. So safe area for that. And then from a West Coast regional as well as national perspective and international perspective, we have clean hydropower, renewable power at 3 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So from a TCO perspective, for a long-term play, you can't find a lower cost environment.
Yeah, you bet. And that's what that's one of the main things I think of when I think of that area is just the renewable energy, and it really goes well with a lot of the conversations that those bigger companies are having about what's most important to them as they think about moving forward with their energy procurement down the road. So it certainly will be 2 fun areas to watch from a growth perspective. And so the last market I want to cover, because actually when I was in Brooklyn I don't know if you remember this, I was in Brooklyn last year and got from across the bay or the Hudson River, I guess got to see your New York building from afar. And so I got to see what y'all have done to it from the aesthetic side of things. And talk about just that acquisition and the process that you all have gone through to not just convert it and make it look better, but also make it an appropriate data center environment for users in that market.
Sure. Incredibly interesting building. We bought the building in 2011. Yeah. And it had amazing bones, right? I mean, how many buildings in Manhattan had access to 40 megawatts of power? They got underground fuel tanks, all this stuff. And then the hurricane happened. Hurricane Sandy happened. And and people changed their mind and their attitude about data centers on Manhattan.
Sure.
Like there are a lot of data centers in basements of buildings. We talked to the healthcare organizations there.
Sure.
And so there's less focus on data centers in Manhattan there for a while.
Yep.
I will tell you happily that there wasn't a single instance with our building. Our building went on through the night. It was the Verizon who was in the building had 0 outages, right? And that kept going.
That's awesome.
So it was an incredible story, but we weren't live yet. We always talked about, boy, if we were live, we could have lit the whole thing up and just shown everybody the world that this building was still going. Yeah. So, but over time we've had great success. It's taken a while, but over time we've successfully filled up the data center that we built, and we're looking to expand in that area. We had to be smart about it, to your point, as we looked at the demand in the market, and we did convert some of it to office space, which has been a really fun project. I mean, another part of the business, in our construction side of the business, right? They had this amazing project where they added windows to the building, and it's a very exciting project they did. But and now it's kind of a right-sized data center for the environment, and we really believe that over time, again, getting back to these proximity-based applications, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen with 5G, but I just have to believe we got 2 million people on the island of Manhattan, 8.5 million people in the city of New York. There's going to be a need for a data center, on the island for applications that need to be there. And the one thing that we know, without a doubt, based on our investment in the building, is that there isn't a building on the island with better infrastructure than that one.
Well, yeah, I think that proves it right there and how it was able to withstand the hurricane and get through that. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so, Seattle, the greater Washington area, Northern Virginia, New York, as you think about the future, obviously 2018 was a great year for the data center industry as a whole. I mean, I think people think 2019 will be a good year as well. But what are your thoughts just about, the future of the industry, how you think this next year will be, and then what gets you excited about being in this part of the industry?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I have any real hot takes for
Sure.
you on on 20 into 2019
Yeah.
and going into 2020. I mean, I think all the trends that we're seeing now are going to continue. The organizations that are successful in the technology space,
Yeah.
right? They're not slowing down.
Yep.
And I don't know if we're going to see another 75 megawatt takedown in Ashburn again, but we might see something similar.
Yeah, sure.
And they might expand to other markets, and we'll
Yeah.
see that. So I don't think anything's slowing down anytime
Yeah.
soon.
When you think about this industry, what makes you excited about being a leader, in the space?
Well, I think, based on the growth, I mean, we're positioned so well, I think, across the board, and it is such an exciting industry. What I love about it so much, having been kind of on the software side of things before, early in my career, and seeing this, and now kind of being, well, not kind of, like being on the infrastructure side supporting this, I'm so excited to see what's going to happen. When we deliver, when 5G becomes a reality, and we essentially deliver into these developers and very creative people, right, this capability of essentially unlimited bandwidth in the hands of people, what kind of applications they're going to create, and what kind of use cases that's going to create, and how that will ultimately then cascade down to the data center providers and what we're going to have to do to deliver. I think that's an incredibly exciting and energizing thing to think about. I never really appreciated data centers. Essentially, didn't really even think about them, right? All those years when we were delivering software. And to think about now, the critical role that they play, and to have some role in that, ourselves is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it's only getting, more and more critical in the infrastructure that it's supporting. So if you could leave, the people watching this with anything, what would you want them to know about?
Well, I guess selfishly, what I would want them to know is that I got space in Ashburn, in that building right there. And it's coming online soon. And we got capacity. Capacity, so give us a call.
Thank you for letting us be here. Thank you for the time, and it's always good to get your insight on the market. It'll be really fun to see Sabey grow over the next several years, and look forward to more of these conversations in the future.
My pleasure.
All right.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, you bet.